Welcome to Behavioral Health Today, a podcast brought to you by the Triad Network. This podcast is designed to share trending topics occurring within the world and our communities and bring them a behavioral and mental health perspective.
Welcome to Behavioral Health Today, a Triad production. I'm your host, Sharlee Dixon. My guest today is Christina Rasmussen. Christina is a renowned grief educator and bestselling author, known for her impactful books, Second First, Where Did You Go, and Invisible Loss. Following the loss of her spouse to cancer in 2010, Christina developed the Life Reentry process, dedicated to bringing compassion and validation to countless individuals navigating grief. Holding a master's degree in guidance and counseling from the University of Durham, she is also pursuing a Master's of Fine Arts degree in painting and drawing at the Academy of Art. Christina's work has been featured in prominent outlets such as ABC News, Women's World, The Washington Post, and the White House blog. And she is a contributor to Psychology Today. We're excited to have Christina with us today as we delve into the topics of grief, transcendence, and the exploration of her latest book, Invisible Loss: Recognizing and Healing the Unacknowledged Heartbreak of Everyday Grief. Thank you so much for joining us today, Christina.
Sharlee, I'm so excited to be here and talk with you today. I can't wait to dive into this conversation.
Absolutely, me as well. So let's just jump right in. Can you tell us about your book, Invisible Losses, and what inspired you to explore the concept of grief and transcendence?
So I want to start with a personal story and my life and how I ended up writing about this kind of loss that I discovered. I was trained very traditionally. I have a master's in counseling psychology, and my thesis, my most important part of my work as a student was the stages of bereavement. I wrote about grief. I was passionate in my 20s as to how people overcome a loss of a loved one. I loved people so much, and I could not imagine ever going through something so devastating. And I remember my professor in England telling me, "You're such a happy person. Why in the world would you want to study grief?" And I told her, I just cannot imagine. I want to help people heal and get through it. And after that, what I didn't expect, had no idea how my life was going to turn out. My very, very young husband was diagnosed with stage 4 colon cancer and passed away at the age of 35. We had 2 young daughters together, and experiencing traditional grief personally versus what I learned was a very different experience for me. And I kind of wanted to run away from it. Nothing could have prepared me for what happened. I didn't think I could ever recover from that. And I promised myself at the time that if I was ever to get back to life and living fully, I will find a way to go get everyone else who's stuck, who's left behind, suffering like this. And I did that. I actually resigned from a corporate job in 2010, and 4 years had gone by, and I felt I was ready to step back into the work. And I started writing. I started running classes. I started writing books. In the beginning, my work, the people who would come to my classes were people who had gone through a very tragic traditional loss, conventional grief. But here's what happened, and here's where this book comes in. I created this model where I help people understand that when we experience something really tragic, we say goodbye to the life we used to have, and we think we are entering a new life. But actually what happens is we go in a place in between the old life we were forced to leave behind and the life we could have. And I call that place the waiting room. And we get stuck there, and we think this is our new life. And people live there, die there. We lose millions of people in that waiting room. They didn't even know that's where they were at. Actually, over the years, over the last 14 years I've been doing this work, thousands of people would write to me and say, "Oh my God, I can't believe I'm in the waiting room." They would recognize themselves and where they're at after they started receiving that information. Even just that awareness was chosen. So I spent time working with so many people from all over the world, different cultures, different ethnicities, different background, different types of tragic losses. And all of a sudden, I would see people find their way out of the waiting room on their healing journey experience what I call a life reentry. And then I would see them getting pulled back in to that stagnation, to that place where they used to be. And my first kind of instinct at the time was like, it must be the tragedy, it must be the loss. And actually it wasn't. And it took me a little bit of time to realize that there was something else that's why I called it invisible, or something that was hidden, something that was outside of that tragic experience. And we started seeing, I wouldn't have been able to write this work, to do this work without the people's stories and the people's shares. We started seeing that phantom, that kind of hidden experience that I call a moment of impact, where at some point in our life, we experience something devastating to the perception of ourselves, and we shifted our understanding of who we are. And the moment we shifted our understanding of who we are, we started doubting ourselves, doubting our skills. And I always get chills when I share this part. It's why I've written this book and why I've done this work. Once we experienced that emotional punch and nobody actually validated or acknowledged that moment of that loss of self, the original self, who we're here to be. For example, this type of loss takes place in a public setting, like in a school setting. Let's say you have students and the teacher is scolding a student publicly. That is the worst possible moment of impact and experience. So much invisible loss comes from a young kid being seen as if they're not worthy, they're not good enough. So we retrieve to that safe place that is the waging, where we go and hide so we don't get hurt again. And then when we come back out again, we're no longer the same. We are the modified version of ourselves, where we go out to please other people, to modify who we are, so we are never going to lose love again. We're never going to lose attention again, that we will be included, that we will not be scolded, that we will not be told off. But ultimately, that's what invisible loss is. And there's like, I can't tell you how many types of invisible loss I've heard of. So the more we share these experiences that we are not supposed to share, because how many times you've heard, Sharlee, people say, I feel guilty for complaining because I have so many great things in my life and that other person doesn't. Who am I to complain about something? I should be grateful for the things I have. And actually, that's wrong. A modern day grief and modern day loss doesn't look the same as it used to. It looks actually very different. I'll pause. I'll drop my mic right now.
It was good. So then you actually bring me to a question that I had while reading your book. So thank you for sharing it with me. But so is there a different process to, I guess, overcoming grief when there is a tangible loss, something like a divorce or, a loss of a loved one or even a pet, versus an invisible loss? So some place I've gotten stuck in a waiting room there. Is there a difference in how grief should be processed, or even how to overcome it?
That's a very good question, Sharlee. And actually, not many people have asked me this. The difference exists in the beginning of the process. Not all mountains are the right mountains for us, or not all paths are the right paths. So what's important in the life reentry model for invisible loss to make sure we do is those exercises in the beginning of the book to understand what type of invisible loss we've experienced. So when we go into the mental stacking aspects of the book, where we actually start to change the narration that's taking place in our head to protect ourselves, when we are rewriting that code, rewriting those thoughts to go out into the world again by tapping into who we really are, we need to make sure that we know that who that person is. We need to understand, where did we leave ourselves behind? What happened to us? And if we don't understand that, and actually a lot of people think they know what happened to them. And for me, what is important in this conversation is to say that what invisible loss is, it's not that it's just invisible to others, it's invisible to us, unless we start asking those questions. There's actually a part of the book right in the beginning where I actually ask people to share their life story. And I say, I give them prompts and I say, even though my parents were great, this is what happened to me. Even though I had a great upbringing, even though I went to the best schools, even though imagine ending that hidden aspect of suffering, and we are revealing that this modern day experience is different to what it used to be about to grieve. And yes, we grieve when it comes to losing a loved one in actually a very different way than when we're grieving the loss of our true and original self. There's a very big distinction. A tragic grief feels um, it's a different kind of sadness and raw emotion. Grieving from an invisible loss, it's actually more anxiety and fear. It has this restlessness. You're waking up every morning with dread. You're feeling something is wrong, or you're not looking forward to your life, to your day. You're not connecting with the people in your life. The job that you have is not quite exactly as it should be, but who are you to question this great job? Because everyone else, your friends, your family think you're the best, and you should be very grateful to have a job like that because we don't have them. And so you are being trained and taught from very early on to be grateful and happy with what we have, because a
Mhm.
long time ago, or other nations and other countries don't have this. And I want to say something really important. It's not that what happens in other parts of the world, or with people who don't have enough, they don't have a home, they don't have food, is not terrible and devastating. We should at least try and understand that this is an additional form of loss. It's not either or. It's
Mm.
not like, yeah, we can only suffer when we don't have food on the table or when someone is dying. We cannot suffer when we experience such invisible anxiety and fear and loss. And we have, as you guys know, so many people who commit suicide. And we often say there was nothing wrong with their life.
Yeah.
And I could just cry about this right now, because it's just, there's nothing wrong. There's nothing wrong. There was nothing wrong. What happened? What happened? This is what happens. Is
Right.
that we don't dare to share and express our true feelings.
I completely agree with you, and especially being a clinician. So I'm a social worker, a practicing social worker, and I see a lot of trauma on a daily basis.
Yeah.
And I say to myself often, man, my life is not that bad because I'm not having to deal with X, Y, and Z, whatever the issue is of the patient or the student that I am working with at the time. So it was almost eye-opening to me to even look at the things that I struggle with, because in my mind, I don't struggle. I don't struggle in the way that would stop my life from moving. That makes sense. So
Because
I
you're
appreciate that as a clinician.
and thank you for saying that. And I'm so glad you're sharing this, because we are so used to that survivor self that I talk
Mhm,
about in the book, that yes, your life, Charlie, is not going to stop because you're so good at surviving it, right?
mhm, yeah.
I don't know. You guys make me feel emotional. We're just looking at each other here, and I'm feeling it all. And I have these conversations every day, nearly, for the book and for the world. And but I want to say, like, oh my God, we have forgotten what it feels like to thrive and to feel alive and to feel like we're excited to live our life. Because even if we're living it in a slightly wrong way, it's the wrong way for us. It is not right for us. And people question us for, there's a whole chapter in the book about feeling divergent, and feeling as if people in our life, when we start to change things that they think are great, are going to
Mhm,
not be happy with us. And
right.
we're going to have to be okay with that,
Yeah.
because that's not their life. It's our life. And we know better. And we need this validation so we can start the journey.
Awesome. And so then I guess that takes me back to something that you mentioned before. How do we then get back to our original selves? Like, how do we
Um,
even know who that person is after years, decades, maybe even of surviving using those coping skills that, I mean, that were helpful in a sense.
Aware.
They were helpful, but then how do we move past that?
Yes. And I want to start by saying I have spent 14 years trying to get rid of the survivor part of us, and it's not possible. I want to say this. This is the news I have to share with everyone. I used to have this exercise that I did so many times, where I would say, folks, we're going to just for 5 minutes, we're going to send the survivor self away so we can have a conversation without that survivor mindset. And I would ask them, where would you send that part of you that's helped you cope and help you survive and help you give you that ability to get through your difficult days? And the number one answer, Charlie, was they would send their survivor self to a tropical island with cocktails.
Absolutely.
This is how much love we have for that part of us. So it's very hard to ever let it go. And we do need it sometimes, and it's okay. But in order to start getting glimpses of that part of us, we have to become very honest with ourselves. And I want to share a story of someone in my class a few years ago. There's three personas in this work. We all have these three parts of ourselves: the part that is surviving, the part that is thriving, which is very small percentage, I would say, only like 5% of our lives, if that, is spent in that kid-like state, and the part that is wise, that I would say that's about 15%. We have about 15% access to that wise wisdom part of ourselves. So I used to do this exercise, and it's in the book as well, where I help people find a memory of themselves thriving. And I remember when something happened for the first time, and I learned so much from that experience. There was this guy in my class, and he said, Christina, and we used to have this, let's say 150 people on Zoom screens like this. He raised his hand and he said, Christina, I have to be honest with you and say, I can't remember my thriver self. I can't remember ever having a memory that was happy and joyful. And I was at first a little surprised, but then quickly I said to myself, but it makes sense, because what happens with our memories of the good stuff of who we really are actually hidden by the memories that bring us to hardship, so we can remember them to protect ourselves in the future from new hardships like those. Does that make sense?
It does.
So actually, and there's so much, by the way, there's so much research and studies around memory retrieval. And are we really remembering the truth of the events of our life? There's a lot I read. I was like sitting there researching this when I was writing the book, and I was like, I can't believe this. What? Someone, I believe in my thoughts and my memories. You mean to say that some of them are not true? They're not real? Or we are actually rewriting some memories after a terrible event happened, and we actually telling ourselves that we used to be happier before it, even though we were not as happy as we thought we would have been. But because we're telling the story to ourselves from the future after we had experienced that event, we're changing the memory of the past. There's so many examples like that. We can have a whole other podcast just on that. But this person could not remember the part of themselves that was free, fun, and just pure joy, because he had been surviving for so long. So what we did, and when we started doing, I would ask always everyone who can remember. I never took it for granted that we all remember. I learned that, like I said, I learned so much from my students. And we started creating present thriver memories for him. He started going into what I call in the book plugins, which are very low risk steps out of the waiting room, because we have to be so careful not to activate our fear center, the amygdala of our brain, the survivor self, because that's going to keep us from actually trying anything. That fear of being hurt again, of losing love again, of experiencing more loss and more moments of impact. So the very first step is to start figuring out when was the last time we had a glimpse of that part of us. And there's two exercises in the beginning of the book. One is tracing an invisible loss that is happening right now. And then the other one was tracing a primary invisible loss. So there's all these questions like, do you remember the time when someone told you that you were wrong about the way you were doing something? Someone scolded you for being yourself. Do you remember the time that you divided yourself between yourself and the world, that the world was against you? There is a collective voice of surviving, which comes, unfortunately, from the best loving parents because they're trying to protect us from their own losses that they experience. They don't want this to happen to us. There's a collective survivor voice around us. And the metaphor I use for that is there's a multiple screens that are telling us how to adapt in this life. And slowly we have to start switching off those screens and rewriting the content that's coming at us, rewriting that inner narrator and stacking our thoughts and finding a way to change the way we're looking at ourselves and not only remember who we really are, but say yes to the things that we really want to be doing. And unfortunately, what's really hard about this, and that's why this was a hard book to write. I wrote this book 3 times to explain something that is not easily explainable. It's important to be true to ourselves. And the very first step after those questions and after those exercises would be to start by being very honest and present in the conversations we're having with each other. Like I'm sitting here talking to you, Sharlee, and I'm as present, as honest, and as sincere as I can ever be in any conversation I would have. And I know you are too. And, and if we're having those moments of honesty, even in small bursts, because it's very scary to be honest with our partners, with our friends, with our coworkers. We live in a world that we're so trained to please other people, right? How can we now change that?
Right.
And start doing it very hard.
We'll be right back after word from our sponsor.
Nearly 9 in 10 registered voters believe the nation faces a mental health crisis, according to a new USA Today Suffolk University poll. Americans are more concerned than ever about their mental health. Mental health first aid provides the resources and training to identify, understand, and respond to signs of mental health and substance use challenges. It provides the confidence and skills needed to offer life-saving assistance, and it provides peace of mind. Our experts provide mental health first aid training for adults, teens, caregivers, veterans, law enforcement, EMS, and school faculty. Mental health concerns are on the rise, but evidence-based training through mental health first aid can make a difference. Visit mentalhealthfirstaid.org to find a course near you, or email hello@mentalhealthfirstaid.org to schedule a training. Courses are available for individuals, groups, organizations, and companies of all sizes. Visit mentalhealthfirstaid.org and make a difference in your community.
It absolutely is. So you spoke a lot about the different phases. So the Life Reentry model does have 5 distinct phases. And so they correlate with these specific in-depth homework assignments. And I can say that because I did just a few of them. And one of the things that I noticed is just in doing the first homework assignment, I needed a moment to sit with what the results were. I needed to think about them and really just let what I read and what I thought soak in. So do you have any suggestions for readers that are going through the same process as they go through the book? Is it something they should do with someone else, by themselves? Should they take their time? Can you go back and forth? Can you give us some insight on that?
Yes, thank you for that question as well. I learned over the years, and especially as I was writing this book, I had an incredible group of editors, and all of them, apart from one, because I think she knew she had to get the editing right. I think. You see, I'm being very honest right now. But everyone else was so human in the process of like going through the book, and they were asking themselves questions that they had never asked or anyone else asked them, and they looked at their life from a perspective that was never offered before. So here's my advice to everyone who's listening and is going to do all this work. First of all, I have these coffee breaks in the book that I say, I know this is hard and I know you want to stop reading, and I pray you don't. I pray that you continue to go through it at your own pace. If you have a friend, a therapist, someone you trust deeply and completely to be yourself, an emphasis on trusting, because if you're going to sit and do this work with a friend that you're trying to please or try to say the right things, it's better to do it on your own because you're going to end up with the wrong responses. I wrote this book for the solo reader, but at the same time, I tried to create a classroom environment and added exercises in there that would allow each person to ask the questions I would have been asking them in the classroom if I was there. And trust me when I say this, I wish my mind is going to be there with everyone as they're going through this without me for the first time. Go slow, have a journal, start on your own. If the answer to the question, do you have someone you can trust, is not getting you the results you want, start the journey on your own. And I wrote this book for the one person sitting by themselves on the couch with a journal. And when you go through it, if something doesn't land, sleep on it, come back, journal a little bit about it, and keep reading. Your pace is your pace. There's no too quickly, too late, too fast, too slow. At the back of the book, there's a guide. I wanted that guide in there, not only for thousands of support groups that I'm hoping will take this book and use it for their own journey as a group, but I wanted the reader to also choose, if they want to, read it from the guide, meaning let's say what week 1 says to do. And then you go in the book and you divide the book in, I think, 9 weeks, and you go slow. Some people sometimes choose to read without doing the exercises to prepare their brain for what's coming. If that's you, that's fine too. But remember this, doing the exercises, just like Sharlee said, gives you a completely different view of yourself. And when that view comes in, take your time with what you're learning about yourself. If you need to talk to your parent, to your friend about what you discovered, ask them questions about something they're remembering, whatever you want to do it, but complete the book, go through the journey. Even if it takes you a year, I want this for you who's listening here right now, and you're feeling as if your life is not how you want it to be, but you don't know what it is that you need to change. This would be the book for you.
Awesome. Thank you for that. So you mentioned just a little bit about how readers can find support in themselves and in others through just the process of life reentry, that model that you present. But so then broadening that, how can individuals support themselves and others who are navigating just the complexities of grief on a daily basis? What can they do?
That's another great question, Sharlee. I love it. So in order for this to become the norm, to normalize our exchange of these moments of impact, these invisible losses, these untraditional ways to look at grief, in order for us to normalize that, we actually have to educate others. We have to also become the listening people. We have to become accepting, validating towards someone who's sharing. We have to respond to our friends, to our family members, to the people in our life the way that we want someone to respond to us. So when someone is going through something and they're not sharing, find a way to show them that you're a safe place for whatever it is that's bothering them to be shared with you, and tell them what invisible loss is. Tell them something like this. Tell them that sometimes in our life, we experience these emotional punches, as if someone punched us in a meeting at work, a friend said that embarrassed us. Or can I just share an example?
Sure, please.
I used to be so embarrassed about this, sharing parts of our life, even especially people who are supposed to, like us, Sharlee, that we are here to guide all these people, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it's important that we show vulnerability, that we show that we are going through these things, and we are like everyone else. And let me tell you, I have a whole list of invisible losses. But there was one time, and I've been through tragedies. I've been through horrible, devastating, traditional grief. I used to think, because of the way I was raised, that because I've been through all of this, I'm tough as nails. Nobody can upset me.
Mm-hmm.
Bring it. Doesn't matter. You tell me anything. I'm tough. I'm strong. I'm the one in my family that's getting everyone what they need, right? And then one time I was in New York City I was invited to this popular dinner with popular people. And I was like, I can't believe I'm invited to this thing. Being honest, this is my inner conversation. That's so great. I'm getting ready to get on the elevator with these people. And someone comes from the group and approaches me. And it's hard for me to even share this because we judge ourselves for feeling certain things, right? Someone comes to me and says, Christina, I'm so sorry, but you can't come at dinner with us anymore. I was just so confused. I said, what do you mean? We're not going, dinner is canceled? She said, I'm sorry, I invited you. I made a mistake. The person who arranged the dinner, and they're all over there, by the way, just a few feet further away from me, just didn't know. And there's just not room for you. And I'm sorry. I am so sorry. She felt so terrible. It was terrible. I had to walk with the popular people, in quotation, to the elevator, take the elevator with them, go down, and being there, just looking around, ready to burst into tears. And this is just probably around 6-7 years ago. And then take a left, and they would take a right, and I would go back to the hotel. And I cried my eyes out. I felt rejected, publicly humiliated. And it took me a while to, I guess, overcome that feeling of being uninvited. I felt like I was in high school again. But life is like high school, right? Sometimes we're all competing. We're all, unfortunately, living in an environment that is a little hard, even for someone who's been through tragic losses and horrible events. So I'm sitting there crying in my hotel room, and I couldn't believe I was me, that not only has the knowledge and the education, but has the life experience. I'm a tough cookie, and here I was. So it doesn't have to be an event that is considered tough or difficult. It can be an experience that just you felt ashamed and left behind, and as if you're not worthy of someone's company. You're not worthy to be somewhere with someone else. And I did the work on that, and I can laugh about it now, but it's a great story that I still struggle sharing. But I believe that it's important to share because I know a lot of us have experienced maybe not the same, but similar moments. I don't know about you guys. Have you ever?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. As you were telling the story, mine isn't the exact same, but I've been there. Yeah.
You have, right?
Oh yeah. And you're just like, cannot believe you're crying about this. Like you're silly. Like, why are you crying? Yeah.
But it's a true loss. I mean, in that moment in time, because of my primary invisible losses that I had done the work on, I realized at the time that I didn't have self-esteem or didn't have that worthiness I needed to have, that I had done so many great things in my life, but I still saw myself in this way. And then when something like this happens, it's even more painful because it kind of triggers all the other things that have taken place in our life. So I hope this was a good example, worth sharing, I think.
It was. Thank you for sharing that. Thank you. Thank you. So are there some common misconceptions about, or myths even, about grief? And how do you work to dispel those through your work, through books like this, through your through your other books?
Yes.
How do you work to dispel those myths?
One of the very first things I did all these years ago when I wrote my first book, Second Firsts, I remember thinking, even though it's our heart that's breaking, this has to do with the brain. And I had to teach myself neuroscience at the time. I did a year-long program. I read every neuroscience book that existed. And I said to myself, it's not just the heartache and the heartbreak. It's the brain that's keeping us in this place. And I knew it from then on, but the world at the time, things are getting better. They still saw it as an experience that you're done in 6 months and that you should just get on with it. And what I want to say to everyone is that they have no idea how hard this is, the traditional grief as well. It's so hard. Your heart does break, and your brain is working so hard to keep protecting you until the end of your life. So you're not only losing the love of your life, your child, you lose everything. You lose yourself, you lose. I felt at the time that I lost everything I've ever had in my life. And I didn't think I would ever be happy again. Never. I couldn't imagine. And there's millions of people who are in this place. And we still don't leave at work for more than 3 days.
Right.
I mean, we are very backwards when it comes to grief, not only from everyday grief, the things that I've expressed today, but even the conventional type of grief. We're getting better, but even that, corporate organizations. I used to work in the corporate world at a big, I'm not going to say the name of the company, but a mega company. And I remember I was working there full time for keeping food on the table, getting my kids with health insurance. I remember going there after my husband died. Oh my God, it was horrible. I had just lost my husband. I was a single mom, and nobody really ever said anything. It was as if it never happened. It was horrible. And I knew then, like, someone has to do something about this. This is wrong. Like, we're being treated as robots, as people that we're just experiencing something that's hard. Oh, okay. I'm sorry for your loss. Right. And here's a casserole. I nearly named my book second verse, no more casseroles. because that's the best we can do, you guys, right? That is the best we can do. And I know I'm putting it very simply, but there's so much more we should be doing. And it's not that grief lasts forever. I don't believe in that concept either. I believe in the surviving aspect of it lasts forever. Even when, and that's how I discovered this form of loss, even when our heart is better, our brain is still in survival mode, and it will not change unless we do something about it.
Thank you for that. I really appreciate that.
Yeah.
So you alluded to, even just now in conversation, you alluded to being able to take care of yourself. You didn't use the word self-care, but that's what it really is, or even self-compassion. So what is the role or the importance in self-care, self-compassion, maybe even self-awareness during the grief process, whether that be a tangible loss or a invisible one?
I didn't know this then, but I know it now. Self-care is the one thing that is of most importance, whether we are grieving an invisible loss or a conventional loss. We actually stop caring for ourselves in every way, whether it's physical, like drinking enough water, eating the right food, moving our bodies, the normal basic things, paying our bills. I used to write blogs. People wake up in the morning and all I want you to worry about today is just drinking enough water, doing the basic things and not to think of anything else, because so many of the basic things are being left behind. I remember in the first year, a friend of mine came to see me at my house. Almost like asleep. It's a very numbing experience when you go through tragedy. I remember I didn't realize my fridge was actually empty. The casseroles had stopped coming a year in, there's no more. And she went and got me all that stuff. And I felt embarrassed a little bit because I just hadn't realized. And I'm someone grew up in Greece. We always had a lot of food in our house. Let me tell you, this was not normal for me. Like, your fridge is always full of food. Like, there's multiple choices, multiple food items for you to eat when you come to my house. Always full of people and always full of food, and that completely changed. So your life after tragic loss is unbearable. I used to say I've been through this unthinkable experience, and why I believed I could do the impossible, right? And why, when I was experiencing invisible loss and thousands of other people, I couldn't understand how these warriors, we are warriors of life. We survived this unthinkable event. We actually could not survive invisible loss. Let me say this over and over again. And I've never said it like this before, but we could not survive invisible loss, but we survived this most unthinkable tragedy. Invisible loss is such a ghost-like experience where we are not in control of ourselves at all, and for years and years and years. It's not like 6 months, a year, 2. It's for the rest of our lives. until we realize it. I hope I'm answering. I know my
No,
passion gets in my way a lot when
I
I talk.
appreciate the passion. Though. It's bringing me in. I'm right here with you. I'm
Good.
totally with you. Yes. So, as we start to wrap up today, can you give some key takeaways or insights that you hope that readers will gain from reading Invisible Losses?
I hope the very first thing that happens to you when you read the book is that you feel validated. You feel seen for the first time from someone that you can't see because I'm not there with you. Even though when I was writing the book, I really saw myself sitting in a room with the reader. Like this was the experience throughout the whole book. But I want you to feel seen and validated for every moment of impact you've experienced. I want you to know you're not crazy. You're not difficult. You are okay. And this is hard what you went through, even if the world is trying to convince you otherwise. This was hard, whatever that was. So I want everyone to receive validation from the very first few pages, that finally things start to make sense. The second thing I want people to make sure that when you do those exercises, especially in the beginning, tracing those invisible losses, you really pay attention to the questions. And even if it takes 5 or 10 minutes, these are very significant moments when you're trying to figure out what happened. When something comes to you, trust what comes to you, because we are so used to doubting ourselves. The survivor self will actually doubt you. Well, are you sure about that? That was not a big deal.
Yeah.
Be careful with that. The survivor self is a bit of a narcissist because it's all about them, not about true feelings. So, and then the last thing I want to say is that give yourself these exercises. I no longer teach this work. My gift to everyone is this book. I no longer feel I'm necessary to be walking by the side of this book, of this work. I feel like I'm passing the baton to you, to the social workers, to the therapists, to the professionals, to the people who are reading. Together, I know that you can do this work, and I know that you can do it well, and I know it's going to be right. It's going to be the right way, however you're going to do it. And you're going to learn so much about your life. And going forward, it's going to be different. Someone said it's going to be better. It's not. Yes, it's going to be better, but what I'm interested in is finding how different it's going to be. I went back to school in 2021, really part-time, when I was starting to go through a new life reentry process. And I want to end with this, that it's never going to be that you're done with this work, unfortunately, because whichever world we find ourselves in, the survivor self, that fear center that exists in our minds, will try to help us modify to please other people, to adjust who we are so we're not being rejected. So we have to be very mindful of that and to keep doing the stack. There's exercises in the book that are called mental stacking. Even if you take 10 minutes a day to kind of change your thoughts and be in control of your mind, I am telling you, it's going to change your life. And I want to end with one last thing. Even for me, this work is in my DNA. Like I will die knowing this deeply. I started having panic attacks in December as we were approaching me preparing to get this book out in the world. I had spent the last year really changing my life and going to art school and doing something just for me, because finally I felt worthy, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like I said yes to myself. I hid it in the beginning. I couldn't tell anyone because, my gosh, what will people think that I'm like being an artist? Oh my God, couldn't have that. I started sharing that, and it's about the way you live your life that helps someone else. It's not just about the way you teach the things. It's about the way you're living your life. Mm-hmm. And it inspired so many people to change their life. Even just by me going to art school, I had changed my life so much the last few years that I was so afraid stepping back into the book world that I experienced the most severe panic attacks. I realized that I thought I was having a heart attack. I thought, this is it. I'm not even going to be able to, to get this book out to the world. And I started to do the mental stacking. I started to do that and a lot of other things. And I went from having panic attacks And I need to share this so people know that we bleed, we are as human as everyone else, to this place where I wake up every morning, and it wasn't easy. There's a lot of work. And I'm excited to have these conversations, and I'm excited the book being out in the world, and I'm excited to spread this message. And I feel happy and well, but it didn't come easy. When you're trying to change your life, it's a very hard thing to do. And that's why often we fail. But with the right mindset and hope and belief that you deserve the life you have come here to live, you got this and you can do this. And thank you for having me in this conversation that's more of a monologue. I am so sorry.
No, it has not been. It has been awesome. But before we go, though, where can our listeners learn more about you, your work, your book, Invisible Loss, Recognizing and Healing the Unacknowledged Heartbreak of Everyday Grief? Where can we learn more?
If someone does one thing, and that's the one thing they do, is just to go on Amazon and put Invisible Loss on the search and just look for the book. If that's the only thing you can do and you don't see anything from me, just go and grab that. If you have more time, just go to ChristinaRasmussen.com, and all of my work is there. I had a crazy idea. I said, what if we have a digital place, a digital library, an Invisible Loss library, where we could anonymously put up all of our invisible losses. So you could go to invisiblelosses.com and anonymously, I have someone who once a week goes and approves the messages, and then it's free, and we don't keep your emails. This is just about leaving that behind. And for everyone who needs validation, even if they don't have the book, they go and read everyone else's experiences and say, me too. So ChristinaRasmussen.com, Invisible Loss on Amazon, everywhere, anywhere books are sold. And I hope you share your invisible loss with your family and friends. I hope you have the courage. And thank you.
Christina, this has been awesome. Thank you so much. And I really appreciate speaking with you today.
And thank you for having me, you guys. It was awesome. And this is what I'm saying. I'm loving my days doing this work with people like you. And I'm grateful for everyone who stayed and listened, and for wanting to be part of this journey. I appreciate you all.
Absolutely. And thank you to our listeners for taking the time to join us. Before we go, I would like to invite you to join us for the June 2024 Wellness Summit series on June 29th. This online event will feature 3 heart-centered hypnotherapy experts who will share their insights on building conscious leadership skills and techniques for personal growth and trauma recovery. This is online and free to attend. You can learn more at triadhq.com/WSS. Connect with BHT podcasts and other mental health professionals on the Triad community, the LinkedIn for mental and behavioral health. Create your profile for free at hellotriad.com. And lastly, the resources for this show and all of our other episodes can be found on our website at triadhq.com/BHT. Thanks again for being with us on the show, and we'll look forward to having you back with us next time on Behavioral Health Today.
We appreciate all the support from our community, and if you like our show, one of the best ways you can support it is by giving us a 5-star rating and leaving a review. Behavioral Health Today is a podcast part of the Triad Behavioral Health Network, all rights reserved.